Hey guys, today we're going to speed through the bill to law process, making this part 2 of our lawmaking process video. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to watch that first on committees. Now, the first step of the lawmaking process is to introduce a bill. Now, a bill is a proposed law, and anyone can write a bill. It can come from any idea, any person, but only members of Congress can introduce and sponsor a bill itself. Now, there are countless influences on this legislative process. The media, for example, interest groups, the constituency, but ultimately a bill starts with an idea, can only be introduced by a congressperson, whether that's a representative or a Senate. Now, in fact, most bills do not originate with individual members of Congress. Usually it's a collective effort, so a group of people will get together to sponsor a bill itself. Now, most bills can be introduced into either the House or the Senate, except for one exception, and that would be revenue bills. So we've seen the House was originally supposed to be closer to the people, so the framers decided that bills dealing with money, taxes, should start in the House of Representatives. Now, overall, there are 10,000 bills on average introduced every session of Congress, and these bills will range in scope and size. And as we will see, that plays a role in what steps the bill takes as it goes through this process. Now, there are a couple types of bills to look at. Comparing public and private bills, what the difference is public bills apply to the nation as a whole. So that would be like Obamacare, for example. And then private bills apply to a particular individual or place. So if the bill is dealing with specifically Washington, D.C., that would be a private bill. Now, there are things called simple resolutions. These deal with rules for operation. These don't deal or don't require a president's signature. They don't have the weight of a law. But for example, this would be a resolution on how the Senate will operate while it's in session. So it deals usually with just one house or chamber of Congress. Now, there are also concurrent operations and resolutions. Again, these are procedural matters that affect both houses, and these do not require the president's signature. Examples of this would be using the Capitol Rotunda, which both may use. So basically, it's like a reservation of that area of the Capitol building, or calling forward a joint session of Congress where both chambers are in attendance, like for the State of the Union. Now, a joint resolution deals with temporary or unusual matters. It must be approved by both houses, and it must be signed by the president. So for example, proposing an amendment or continuing or emergency appropriation of funds. Those would be joint resolutions, and legally there is no difference between a joint resolution and a law. And then finally, we have a unique thing that happens sometimes, which is called an omnibus bill. And an omnibus bill happens when a bill grows to mammoth size. It gets very, very large, takes care of several pieces of a law, addresses multiple programs. It gets very big. So for example here, this is a cartoon depicting the omnibus bill of 1850, which ends up becoming the Compromise of 1850. So as you can see from this cartoon, there are many, many facets that became this bill, right? It started out as 5 separate, but then morphed into something huge that addressed multiple concerns, multiple programs. Now, once the bill is introduced, it will move to the committee, and the Senate Majority Leader and the House Rules Committee assigns bills to the committees that are appropriate in each chamber of Congress. Now, each committee has 3 stages that it goes through for the bill itself. The first are hearings, and a thorough discussion of the bill would take place. Right? The chair of the committee would call for a published report and a summary, which would then, once they receive that, go to markup. Now, markups are where committee members, would amend the bill until they are satisfied with it. And markups can have a couple of different requirements. There are differences. So in the House of Representatives, any amendment made during markups have to be what we call germane. Right? They have to be specific to the subject of the bill, right? That's to keep things efficient, not going off track due to the size of the House. Now, in the Senate, there can be non-germane amendments, and these are also known as riders, right? They're called riders because they ride, quote unquote, onto an unrelated bill, often added to benefit a member's agenda or programs, enhance the political chances of a bill, for example. And really, these can be on any subject. They don't have to be specific to the subject of the bill itself. Now, at this stage of the process, a bill can be pigeonholed. So the chair of the committee can decide not to, that should say move, excuse me, a typo, guys, not to move the bill forward for debate until later, if at all. So as you can see, this gives the House a lot of power, or the chairperson, excuse me, a lot of power if the bill ever gets a debate. Now, the House does have something to make, again, this a little bit more efficient. They have something called a discharge petition, which ultimately would make sure that a bill is pulled from committee onto the floor. So if enough representatives vote for a discharge petition, that can be or prevent the pigeonholing from happening. Now, something to note, most bills will die in committee. Most bills do not make it out of this phase because of disagreements or in amendments, whether it's being pigeonholed, the summary or the hearing doesn't go as planned. So most bills do not make it out of this spot. But let's say that it does. The third step would be debate. So the bill would then be reported out to the floor. And usually the ratio that was seen in the committee of yeses and nos speaks to the bill's chances on the floor, right? At this point, the amendments, or more amendments, I should say, may be added during debate. But any amendments that are made would have to go back to the committee where the bill started in order to be approved once again. Now, there are important differences for debate between the two chambers of Congress. Now, in the Senate, the bill goes to the Senate floor, and as we've seen, there can be unlimited debate due to sizing in the Senate, and this is called a filibuster, where the point is to talk the bill to death and delay a vote. Now, senators can end a filibuster with 60 votes. That is called the rule of cloture. Okay. And something else to prevent filibusters from happening is this idea of unanimous consent. So unanimous consent is a way in the Senate to try and speed things up. It's basically requested as a way to limit debate. And if someone objects, usually that's a sign of a filibuster. So then the motion would be put on hold, and ultimately the delay or the debate would be delayed anyway. Now, in the House of Representatives, as we saw in part 1, has that rules committee that sets the parameters for debate in terms of how long it can be debated, how many amendments may be added, etc., etc. Now, voting on bills is almost nearly impossible to determine how representatives and senators are going to vote. It's really hard for them to determine what people want in their state and district. So these representatives will often look to town hall meetings, public opinion polls, they'll search their mail, their emails for what their constituents are looking for. Now, something that is very controversial in terms of Congress is often voting for or against a bill is not really apparent in terms of looking at congressional behavior. It's really hard to pinpoint why Congress people are voting for or against a bill. There are a lot of different models of congressional voting behavior that we'll look at here in a second, but something else that happens is something called log rolling. And really, log rolling is trading votes to gain support for a bill, excuse me. So the congressperson would agree to back someone else's bill, and then members can then secure a vote for their own bill by agreeing to vote in exchange. So maybe some people consider this to be a little bit shady. But this is something that happens, which makes it hard to determine how Congress people are going to vote. Now, there are 4 main models of congressional voting behavior, and the first is the partisan model. Now, the partisan model is kind of what it sounds like. The congressperson would follow their party's general beliefs, and they are encouraged to follow the party line vote. So Democrats vote for Democratic bills, Republicans vice versa. The delegate model of congressional voting behavior ultimately is the representative and senators would try to reflect the will of their constituency or the people that they represent. Now, this is often the model that is used more so in the House than in the Senate, largely in part due to those short-term limits, right? They want to make sure their constituents feel like their voices are being heard. Otherwise, they face losing their re-election after the term is up. Then we have the trustee model. And the trustee model is ultimately the idea that, well, we as representatives and senators have been entrusted by our constituencies to use our best judgment. And this is really regardless of how our constituents may view an issue. And again, this is seen more in the Senate rather than the House of Representatives because they're more removed from that political process. So they can make those more reasonable, rational, logical, quote unquote, decisions using their best judgment. And then finally, we have the Politico model, and this blends the delegate model and the trustee model. And this is where the congressperson would consider the variety of factors in front of them, decide their action, and vote for whatever makes the most sense to them at the time during the periods of low public opinion. So that would be more toward the trustee model. Or during periods of high public opinion or strong public opinion, would listen to their constituency. So that's more of the delegate model. So it's a blend of those two. Now, regardless of what chamber it is debated in and those methods and procedures or how the congressperson votes, if the bill receives a majority on the House floor, it passes, and then the process would then repeat in the chamber that the bill did not start in. So if it starts in the House, it would move to the Senate and vice versa. Now, the fourth step would be the conference committees. So once a bill is passed, something has to happen. So an identical bill must pass through the House and the Senate in order to be signed by the president and become a law. Now, through the germane and non-germane amendments, usually this does not happen. Usually the bill passed by the House and the Senate is a different version. So this is where the conference committees step in. Their job is to reconcile the two different versions of a bill passed by the chambers of Congress and come to a compromise. Now, once this is reached, it then must go back through both chambers to be approved. So it has to go back through the House and the Senate. Now, if it receives approval from both chambers of Congress and they've secured a majority vote on that identical bill, it would land on the president's desk. And the president can complete three actions, or one of three actions. One, a signature. If they get a signature, it becomes a law. A veto, it does not become a law, and usually the president will send the bill back to Congress with reasons for vetoing. Now, the exception would be that Congress can vote with 2/3 of each chamber to override that veto. This is very uncommon, but it is a check on the president from the legislative branch. And then finally, the pocket veto is an option as well for the president. So the bill, if nothing is happening, or the president takes no action, within 10 days of Congress adjourning session, the bill would be vetoed. So this is a way for them to veto without actually signing or officially vetoing the bill. Now, something that we've talked about, the president cannot line item veto a bill. This is found to be unconstitutional. They cannot veto specific portions of a bill and then sign it into law. They cannot edit the law themselves and then sign it. So it has to go back through Congress and receive that majority vote in both chambers of Congress. So take the next few moments, guys, and respond to these summary questions so that way we can talk about these and debrief this process in class. Please make sure you're pausing the video if you need to get everything down, and make sure you write down any questions you have about this. And I will see you guys later. Bye.